Good afternoon, Tansei Anin. Welcome to APTN InFocus. I'm Daryl Stranger. National Indigenous Languages Day is on Friday, March 31st, this Friday. So we thought today's episode would be very fitting to take a look at Indigenous languages and the importance of keeping them alive. Now, across Canada, there are more than 70 Indigenous languages being spoken, with over 200,000 speakers. We will be putting a few of those languages in focus, including one that has been declared extinct. And of course, we want you to join in on our conversation. You can tweet us at APTN InFocus, or you can email us at infocus@aptn.ca. Now, before I introduce you to our guests, let's take a look at one of the many initiatives working to keep language alive.
It's so important that people see that there's hope and there's an ability to get that language back.
Started in 2017, the Ojibwe language strategy called Anishinaabe Moda is working towards revitalizing Anishinaabe language throughout Ontario. The program works with youth in preschools all the way up to post-secondary education and anyone who just wants to learn. The program is a partnership between Rainy River School Board, Seven Generations Education Institute, and Say It First, with 10 First Nation communities in Ontario. Say It First wants to reduce language loss and produce more speakers of Indigenous language.
It's their creator, it's their language, and every action we take is helping somebody connect back. So it's not about ego, and it's not about I did this and you did that. It's how do we connect people back to their culture and their language? And I think and we've been unwavering on that.
Educational resources from the program include books, videos, songs, and games for people to learn and practice their skills with the language. Heather Campbell is the Director of Education at Rainy River School District School Board. She says students taking Ojibwe courses in Fort Frances have been on the rise since the initiative started.
There was a time where French was the dominant language, where you see more students taking French and very few students enrolled past grade 9. Now we are equal to, in some cases, surpassing the number of French students. So that speaks a lot to the relevance, the importance of language to our students, but also they're seeing it as a possibility in their futures.
Seven Generations is an Indigenous-led educational organization that provides community-based and student-centered learning opportunities through language and culture. Brent Tukeny is president and a member of Couchiching First Nation. He says the importance of understanding Anishinaabe without translation is key to getting the full effect of the language and culture.
Being able to sit there in a ceremony and understand what the elder's saying in the language, because as you know, literal translation of Anishinaabe into English, there's things that are lost. You need to understand the Anishinaabe in ceremony and in you know what we're doing on our communities, because there's things lost when you translate it to English, and so that's what's really important.
One of the goals of the program is to eventually have those youth learning the language now to grow up and teach the language to the next generation. All of the program's resources are available for free online for anyone to access. Shannon, Mike, thank you, Miigwech, for being here. Shannon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Miigwech. Wawateki Juko Kindigo, Nagigimsimanikaning Nindonji, Nagignindotem. Ganiganashgang Anishinaabe Moda no Kiwan. So my English name is Shannon King. I am of the Otter Clan. My community is Nagigimsimanikaning in Treaty 3. And my title, Ganiganashgang Anishinaabe Moda no Kiwan, loosely translates into me representing the language work being done at Seven Generations Education Institute.
And Mike, thank you as well for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name's Mike Parkhill. My friends call me Jingwak, which is white pine in Anishinaabe Moan because I'm tall and I'm white. I'm non-native, but I'm very respectful of the language and the importance that the language means, the ancestry to the Anishinaabe people.
Well, to start us off here, can we? I think we should just start simple. And what is Waking Up Ojibwe? I'll kind of leave that open to the both of you.
Do you want to start, Mike?
Yeah. Waking Up Ojibwe is the name of the project that's funded by the Ministry of Education. And it's a combination of 8 school boards have contributed into this program. And what we're doing is building out resources and programs and trying to get community-based language activities that actually work. And once we get those established, we then go out to the other 7 school boards in Northern Ontario to get them to propagate what we've already learned and what we've developed. Everything we do on wakingupojibwe.ca, and Shannon will talk about that shortly. Everything we do is editable, so anyone can use it in their own area and customize the material to fit their own way of speaking. But in a nutshell, we want to get people speaking 20 hours a week for 3 years so that they become conversationally comfortable and they can pass that language on at that point to community members and future generations.
Well, Mike, you just mentioned the 20 hours a week. Where did that number come from, and how did you guys settle on that number?
That's just a generally accepted number. I read it probably 15 years ago. I can't cite the source, but it seems to be consistent with the French language and other languages that are taught around the country.
Well, and Shannon, I'll jump to you here. How and when did this idea come up for the program, and who can use your resources?
Well, I was brought on in 2017. And so, Mike Parkhill, Say It First, had been working with 7 generations for a number of years, gathering data, working with communities, kind of building momentum towards this partnership with the Ministry of Education and the Rainbow District School Board. And so I came on, and really my job turned out to be just kind of engaging with community, finding out what their barriers to learning their language were, things that they were using that they found useful, listening to some of their suggestions and implementing those. And so taking, that feedback from the community, from the educators, met with elders, youth, leadership, and families, just listening to what they felt might help them in their language learning journey, and then applying that into their programming.
And now, again, this question is could be open to either of you. Why is this program so important, one? And then maybe a second part is, why is it so important in general that we keep Indigenous languages alive?
I'm going to default to Shannon on that one.
I think programs like this that are centered around reclaiming our own language are very important. There's a healing process when reclaiming our language. So many things that were done intentionally and unintentionally to take the language away. And so it's an empowering and decolonizing for those who are actively trying to do that, movement and activity that you can do to really get to know who you are. Also, learning any language, but your own language, helps connect you back to that worldview. So now you get to see the world through our ancestors' eyes. You know what I mean? There are a lot of ways that our language interacts with the world around us that isn't the same as English, right? So then it changes your worldview, and then it changes your approach to the world ahead of you.
And Mike, I know I done a story, we were talking off camera, I done the story a couple of years ago originally, and it's been a few years since then. So I wanted to ask you, what sort of changed or expanded maybe in the few years since the story aired, and what sort of resources have you guys added, if you will, to the program?
All right, thanks. We continue to build out language kits, and it's called scaffolded learning. So if we learn something in grade 2, in grade 3, we take what we learned in grade 2 and we can expand on it and just continue to expand as time goes on. That's been an important change, because when we first talked, we just were putting up as much content as we could because there was such a lack of content. But now we've actually got a strategy, a pedagogical strategy around releasing it. And we've got a teacher that's working on our team, Carissa Kopanis. She's making sure that everything is going to be used in a classroom. we can't force anyone to use our material, but we do have 85 teachers that have signed up and are now learning it and using our material on a daily basis. And this goes from like Toronto District School Board, Grand Erie. We've got some in the US and the 8 northern school districts, York Region District School Board. There's a lot of people now that are using it that didn't have access to that information. The average language teacher spends about 2.3 hours a day creating their own content for the next day's lessons. And what we're trying to do is ease that burden on those teachers to attract teachers to come into the profession that are speakers. And we also want the ones that are there to be satisfied with their work and not, chewed up and spit out sort of thing. So we want them to continue working, and this is how we're doing it. We're trying to give them their 2.3 hours a day back.
So then
we've also, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. COVID caused us to change paths quite a bit. A lot of our programming up until COVID was face-to-face, and then COVID presented that opportunity. And I hate calling it an opportunity because so many people had to perish and suffer as a result. But we ended up creating a learning platform that we just launched at the end of January. And it's very kinesthetic learning. So if you can see it, touch it, taste it, feel it, or hear it, you can learn it better. So we've got a lot of components built in, like text to speech, so we can actually type in words and the computer will speak back to you. We had to program an avatar, 37 different mouth placements to accommodate the Anishinaabe Moan language. So now we've got the text to speech integrated to an avatar, so somebody can actually start, I'd say within 3 months, they can start making skits of different avatars speaking to each other, and then they can learn the language through watching people speak. So we're just continuing to enhance that. This learning platform I'm talking about was developed by second language speakers. It's like everything Shannon and I do, it's all community driven. We went to second language students and said, what do you need? And they said, we need a second language speaker teaching us, because they say all the words and all the sounds, and a first speaker sometimes glides words together and it confuses us. So we had a bunch of second language speakers that came out of our adult Anishinaabe Moan class. They do about 30 hours a week for 3 years. We hired the best of that class, and they've developed this learning platform. So the order in which you learn word parts, how you learn them, all the messages that go, as Shannon talked about with the worldview, all that is built into the learning software. But the most important thing is there's no right way or wrong way to speak, because I think in the past there's been failure, people hanging on to words or their dialect. And we're just teaching one dialect, but we're giving everyone the opportunity to customize it in their own way of speaking in their own communities or households.
Well, that sounds super cool and super awesome and a great resource to have for so many people. Shannon, I'll come to you, and maybe is there plans for, I don't know if expand is the right word, but where do you guys see this going in the future?
So Mike mentioned, hiring some learners from the last cohort. And so there's a program that incentivizes adults to learn language, and in hopes to connect them back with their language and maybe what they want to continue a path or a career. A lot of the programs that we have are geared towards lifelong learning. Start from high school, we work with families. There's lots of different ways we try to incentivize learning, help lessen the burden of living in a Western world while learning language. And so my hope is that we continue this momentum, and it now gets taught in our schools right from kindergarten all the way, giving that opportunity into high school, and then back into our homes. And so that there's more spaces and places that we hear language that we can practice. And, Mike had mentioned second language learners teaching. And the good thing about that is they teach, and then it solidifies their learning. Also, they have an understanding of what it's like to be an adult and learning this language. and but never to replace that relationship with our fluent speakers. So just to kind of build that confidence in at least knowing or having a small foundation to have that conversation, and then move towards feeling confident, because there's something with us learners and fluent speakers. We really want to make them proud. We want to show them how much that we care for the language. We want to show them our appreciation for keeping the language all throughout our history in order for us to have it. And so that's kind of what building that confidence with another second language learner is really helpful, so that when we do approach a fluent speaker, if we're feeling a little anxious, because as adults too, we have a hard time making mistakes, and so we pull that with us. So that's my goal, like that's my long term, is that they're not just programs anymore, they're actual environments and situations and homes that have language, and that we open our people's eyes up into the world of language learning. They're a very helpful, humble, loving group of people who are really just dedicating their lives to honoring the hard work and resilience of our ancestors in keeping our language and keeping our knowledge within that language.
Well, it's really well said, Shannon. And just before we let the two of you go, everything is completely free online, right? I just wanted to make sure that our audience knew that. That's completely free online?
Yeah, so wakingupojibwe.ca is our website. And so that's where we have books that you can print off. There's read-along videos with the books, all read by a fluent speaker and Anishinaabe. We have language kits, as Mike had mentioned, and within those kits there are teacher tools, so a learning toolkit, but also feel free to use those resources in any way. And the other part about alleviating some of those extra hours for teachers is that we really appreciate feedback. So if a family has utilized the kit or has tried to utilize a kit and they want to provide us with feedback, we're really receptive and welcoming to that. And we've had other nations ask to use our resources in their languages, and we're really grateful that they were able to find some use in that as well.
Well, that all sounds super encouraging, and the work you guys do is just amazing work. So again, what you guys do is just great, and we'll have to leave it there. But Shannon, Mike, thank you guys so much for joining us, Miigwech, and I hope we can chat again soon.
Miigwech, Daryl.
Miigwech, Daryl.
All right, we have to pause for a brief moment here on APTN in Focus. When we come back, we'll speak with a team working to bring back a language that has been declared extinct for decades.
Join our conversation now. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page, follow or tweet us at APTN in Focus, and send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
Welcome back to APTN in Focus. Our next guests are from the Qualicum First Nation on the West Coast, and they're part of a team working to reawaken the Pentl'ach language. It was declared extinct by the Canadian government in the 1940s after its last fluent speaker passed away. Joining us now is Jesse Rakama and Matt Andriata. Matt, Jesse, thank you so much for being here on In Focus. We really appreciate it. I understand, Jesse, are you able to introduce yourself in this language before we get the interview going?
Yes. I'd squeal. Swat squish na Jesse. To watch and Qualicum. So this is a good day. My name is Jesse, and I am from Qualicum.
And Matt, you're still working on it just as much as Jesse, I understand, right?
Hi Trail, Sat Squish na Matthew and Drieta. I'm also from Qualicum, from the Qualicum First Nation, and happy to be sitting with you today.
Well, we really appreciate it, and it was a great job on the intros. I know it's probably a little hard with what you guys are doing, but we really appreciate it. It was a great job. Can you guys tell us what you're doing and the project that you're working on in regards to the Pentl'ach language? I hope I got that right.
Yeah. Maybe it's best if we start kind of at the start, I guess. Our work kind of began in a more official capacity around 2018. Through the continuation of a project that I had started at UBC, and then in partnership and communications through our elected chief, Gordon Michael Rakelma, who had formed a partnership with the provincial government, and a woman named Sarah Quinn, who works for the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. And that's when funding started to flow a bit more. But previous to that, I know that Jesse and his mom and others in the community had been doing some work around the language as well. It's a language that's been labeled by anthropologists and linguists as extinct since the 1940s, and probably considered that for even longer. So that's something that we, as a community, we're feeling the absence and wanted to start undoing that understanding and reconnecting with the language. So that's kind of when the work started in a more official capacity.
Well, Jesse, as Matt had mentioned, you and your family have been working on this. So what was it like for you, and maybe why did you get started in trying to revitalize this language?
Back in my earlier interest of language, like I kept hearing the phrase that it was extinct, and so what I did was I went to look up, see if there's like any sort of documentation whatsoever, just Googling different forms of the spelling of Pentl'ach, and what I found was there was a set of documents at the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia that had a bunch of Franz Boas's handwritten notes that he had documented of Pentl'ach back in the late 1800s. And so my mom and I had gotten in touch with somebody from there who was sort of in tune with the idea of bringing those sorts of knowledge and papers back to communities through repatriation. And so they were able to hook us up with those documents before they were digitized. And then at that point, I just started reading and started recognizing some words I knew from other languages, and really just started to get attached to the documents from there. And that's where I started working on it.
Well, this question could be for either of you, but you guys had mentioned this project and how it's sort of picked up some steam, I guess, over the last few weeks and months here. But why is this project necessary? I mean, what prompted the need for this project to begin in the first place?
Ooh. It's a bit of a loaded question, and I think you can really take that in a lot of different directions, right? I mean, languages are part of who we are. They're a part of how we understand the world around us and how we relate to it. And it's informed by the world around us, and vice versa too. So you're talking about a worldview. And during a time in Canada right now when conversations about reconciliation and healthier relationships with Indigenous people and the broader public are so prominent, conversations around the language and work around our languages, in BC makes up for over 50% of the linguistic diversity in Indigenous languages for all of Canada. So to have those conversations, you have to include language as well, because when you're including language, you're including our worldviews, you're including healing from the absence of that language too, which is something that I think Jesse can speak to as well, because that's realistically a really big goal of our work here, is to begin and keep healing from that absence, and also recognizing why that language isn't there anymore in the same way that it once was too. So recognizing the problem and addressing it and undoing those understandings that are harmful. The word extinct is a violent word.
Yeah.
And oftentimes in relation with the language, it gets extended to ourselves as people and our culture and our ways of being. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
that's really well said, Matt. Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, Jesse, just Matt had touched on my next question. Maybe why or what you guys are maybe hoping this project brings or comes from this project in terms of the language.
I really hope that it gives us a sense of balance and understanding who we are in terms of our identity as Indigenous peoples, and it allows us to bring back a massive part of who we are in terms of practical goals. Like, I know long term, I would love to see conversational fluent speakers again, but I understand, like, we're essentially coming from a space where we're almost entirely non-speakers and have been for a number of years. And when we get a project like this and building a type of momentum, we can sort of build it together and give ourselves that pride and understanding of who we are and how we understand how we belong to the land we live on, because that's never been a question, but that sense of pride isn't always there, and we're really missing that. And that's, like Matt had touched on before, it's a big process of healing for us, and not even just coming to terms with the terminology of extinction, but just in terms of understanding who we are as people and how we belong to this land. And the land knows when we're speaking those languages. Our ancestors understand when we're speaking our language and where we're trying and how we're succeeding. So it's really a part of making those old people proud again.
Well,
yeah, I think part of it is picking up our responsibilities to our ancestors. That's something Jesse and I have talked about before. And, sure, these words were documented by a German anthropologist way back when, and that's what we're working with. But those are words that were left for us as gifts and teachings laid down at our feet by our ancestors. And it's up to us to pick them up and carry them forward too for the following generations. We're kind of just the start. We know that there's a lot of work ahead of us and ahead of our nation in general, and we're trying to lay the groundwork and the foundation in a good way so that Jesse's kids and the younger generations following us can continue picking those teachings and gifts up from our ancestors.
Yeah, that's really well said, Matt. And I guess I could have asked this question maybe towards the beginning, but what is the current situation with the language? Is it are there lack of speakers? What's the current situation like that you guys are working with?
We presently have maybe about 2 silent speakers, and that sort of their recollection of hearing language was from one of our passed on relatives that taught them just some vocabulary back when they were kids, and other than that, just even smaller handful of people who are, you could kind of say, learners.
Right.
Yeah. So the situation too is Jesse's taking on a lot of the reconstruction work, but we're working almost exclusively off of written documentation to discern and learn what our language sounds like and what it can look like and how we can build it ourselves too. And it's a language revitalization project, but it's also a reclamation project too, because we've got to take those things back for ourselves. And the way we're finding ourselves having to do it, Jesse has said this before too, is you're almost having to learn 5 different languages to start to learn ours. So there are some barriers. It is a different, very unique situation in terms of the work that we have to do in order to speak these words and get to the places where we might want to go with it. But that is a big part of the situation as well, is we're working off of written documentation, and that's not a traditional way that our language would have been communicated as well. So there's a few different levels of translation that we're going through, and it seems, from my perspective, watching Jesse work too, more closely with the linguistic side, it's a scientific, artistic approach that is very unique and interesting as well. And I think that really speaks to how our languages came to be to begin with, right? Our traditions were born out of practice and experience and trial and error. And we're kind of taking on a similar journey right now too.
Well, you had touched on it a little bit, Matt, but I guess I can now open this question up for the both of you, and that's, what's this project look like? What's being done within the project? Like, what do you guys do sort of on a maybe daily or weekly basis with this language revitalization, like you said, reclamation project?
So I essentially go through the documents that we have, that Boaz collected from the knowledge of our ancestors. And some of those documents are English in Pentl'ach, and some of those documents are German in Pentl'ach, as well as a collection of 6 stories that were originally collected in German in Pentl'ach. And so I have been combing through all the stories line by line to find any sort of extra vocabulary that Boaz might not have documented in his vocabulary list. And I've been comparing the root words of the vocabulary with neighboring languages to sort of find the most likely similar word that can kind of guide us in a direction to be able to say the words properly and have an understanding of how the sentences were structured and all those sort of minute details.
Yeah, Jesse takes on, again, a lot of the brunt of the linguistic side of the reconstruction work. And I have found myself kind of working 2 different projects at the same time that are very interwoven, because we were finding through our language work, which is what we started with exclusively, you can have a language project, you can start bringing this language back to our community, but there's so many different other levels that have to go along with the language and that have to be addressed. So that's, culture, history, there's levels of shame, there's levels of trauma in relation with these conversations and our language within our community and why we don't have it anymore. And all of Canada is learning more and more every day those reasons and the violent efforts that it took to extinguish things like this, or attempt to extinguish them. So my side of the work has been also to look into and bring to light more historical contexts and understandings and cultural contexts from within our own community and from written documentations as well.
Well, Matt, Jesse, we really appreciate you guys coming on and updating us on the incredible work. I mean, I just find this fascinating that there's basically nobody speaking this language, and you guys are just going off of, you said, German and Pentl'ach. So it's just incredible work. And thank you so much for coming on and updating us. And we'll have to get an update from you guys a little down the road with this project and see where things are at. So thanks so much for this, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Across Canada, there's an estimated 70 Indigenous languages, but 2/3 are considered endangered. Inuinnaqtun is one of them. Our reporter Charlotte Moore Jacobs takes a look at how the community of Inuinnaqtun Nunavut is fighting to revitalize their native tongue.
Jessamine Bolt has never studied Inuinnaqtun at Inuinnaqtun High School. That's because there haven't been any Inuinnaqtun classes offered in years.
As a grade 12 student at the school, I want the opportunity to learn Inuinnaqtun. If we, the younger generation, can have Inuinnaqtun class, it will improve our knowledge and keep it from disappearing.
But she's determined to change that. Here's her persuasive letter imploring the school to offer the local dialect.
Elders might feel hurt that the next generation is not being educated in our language. I really wanted to fight for this, and I hope something gets done about it, because it was just an assignment at first, but now it's I feel like it's something more now.
The roughly 1,600 person hamlet of Inuinnaqtun has deep roots in the Inuinnaqtun language, but it's the most endangered Inuktitut language in Nunavut, a dialect that could be extinct in less than 2 generations.
It was really weird that there is no classes here. It's our first language. It's a big part of our culture.
Alicia Milton also wrote a letter to the school. She's been here since 2019, but is originally from Pond Inlet and fluent in Inuktitut.
Well, language for me, I guess, would be our way of communicating and somewhat connect in a way.
According to the Kitikmeot Heritage Society, there's less than 60 fluent Inuinnaqtun speakers remaining. The Territorial Minister of Education, Pamela Gross, says longtime language instructors are retiring, presenting challenges at delivering classes.
We're looking to see what options are available to enhance the wage for that position particularly, and to increase that will hopefully be able to recruit more people from other professions.
Rosemary Mayak is a respected Inuinnaq elder with nearly 50 years experience in language instruction and curriculum development. Her resource books are written in such a way where the adult speaker is encouraged to interact and converse with the child as they absorb the language. She says a good language program must have an elder as well as a teacher working together.
So that they're hearing the conversation, the language in use in a very active, functional way, and not just how some teachers tend to teach language. Here's a word, say it, repeat it, say it, but they don't know, if they haven't heard the language being spoken, it's hard for them to properly pronounce and understand.
While it is true we can learn at home, we need the expertise of a teacher to make us fluent in the language.
While Bolt and Milton missed out on studying Inuinnaqtun before graduating, their calls to action have been heard. A language instructor has finally been hired this January.
Let's go to social media now with our social media editor, Jesse Andrushko, to hear what some of you are saying about today's topic. Jesse, what do you have for us?
Thanks, Daryl. Online, we asked, what are some ways to revitalize Indigenous languages? We received a lot of insightful answers. Let's take a look. First, from Max, use as much of it at home. No matter what, continue learning. Share with your family, ask your elders. Joshua said, add all of them to the Official Languages Act. From Delaney, have classes for kids and adults on the weekend, pushing for more immersion schools in urban settings. Push for more cultural programs in general, printing dictionaries, have more interpretive practice at global events. From Joe, redub old cartoons, movies, TV shows, make a real deadly video game where you have to learn the language to advance to the next level. Gen said, immersive learning and culture from the beginning. Lindsay said, we have an agency here called Niawasa in Hamilton, Ontario that has 1 or 2 Anishinaabe bingo every month for beginners learning. Tiffany said, This has to be in our education. Starting as young as preschool, they are our future, need to share our knowledge and language to them now. Thank you for all the great answers. National Indigenous Languages Day is this Friday, and we need your help celebrating. We want to share your videos of people speaking their language. All you need to do is record yourself saying your name, where you're from, and say Happy National Indigenous Languages Day in your language. Send it to us by emailing it to share@aptn.ca or message to us on APTN News Facebook or Instagram page. Here's a video of APTN CEO Monica Ile sharing her language.
Kwai, Hindaliweze Monica Ile, Alnambaskwa, Nea Odzi Odanak Mahokawangan. I'm also the CEO of APTN. I want to wish you all a happy National Indigenous Languages Day.
Join our conversation now. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page, follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus, and send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
All right, thanks for that, Jesse. We'll be back with more language talk in just a few minutes. Stick around. Welcome back to APTN in Focus. Now joining us is Kim Halcrow. She's a teacher based in northern Manitoba and has been teaching the Cree language there for 7 years. She tells us a little bit of how she likes to add her own way of teaching into the lessons. Kim, hello, Tanse Anin. Thank you so much for joining us here on APTN in Focus. Now, before we begin, would you like to introduce yourself for our audience?
Hi, Danse Kim Halcrow Nisnigasun. Kinasel sipik ni nosje, Gila Manitoba, Niwigan Megots, Tatoskan uta Gillam School. Kiskinoma kawasak Inuinnaqtun uta grades nursery to grade 6. Sige gats Depakuk Aski uta Tatoskan Kiskinoma kawasak Inuinnaqtun.
Well, that's so great to hear, Kim, and we'll start with you teaching Cree. I'd love to know how long have you been teaching Cree for?
This is my 7th year teaching up here in Gillam, Manitoba. So our school is very diverse, and I started with grades 2 to 8, and it was a little hard for 7 and 8s because I'm not really, I don't have a degree in education, but I do speak the language because on my resume I wrote speak Cree, right? And then when the job came about, I went as an interview for education assistant. I have my certificate on that. I was an education assistant for almost 13 years. And then coming up here, the lady that I'm thankful to this day that basically handed me the job, and ever since that, I've been teaching here, and it's been amazing, and I love it every day. And like I said, it's my 7th year, and so it's been quite a journey. But in between that, I've been approached to do beginners Cree with Indigenous Languages of Manitoba and other organizations that I do beginners Cree. So I feel that's being a language keeper, what I was told, and so it's rewarding to at the end of classes, and I hear them individually speaking and introduction, which is very important to do in language, as you could hear what I did in the beginning.
So, why is it so important that we are teaching Cree and we are bringing these languages not back to life, but we're bringing them more to the mainstream, and we're getting more people to learn these languages? Why is that so important, Kim?
I asked my students that at the beginning of the classes that I do, and the majority of them they say it's because their grandparents or parents went to residential school, and they said that they weren't allowed to share because of what happened, and the students that I have said to that they're adopted, they knew that they were Indigenous and somehow they wanted to learn their language. And I know it's hard to begin at first. It was very sensitive, and once we started talking and got them in that environment of all of us are on the same page, wanting to learn the language no matter what, right? Mm-hmm. And then so it was hard at first, and I told them, I said, you know what, I'm there too, because my parents and grandparents did go to residential school, and I have my father living with me, and we do speak. He speaks it very fluently, but there's times where I have a hard time speaking it back, but I do understand what he's saying, and I try my best to answer back as much as I could. And as for my family, they know a little bit here and there. There's that connection that you need to find to revitalize that language around. You have to be around that environment to really wanting to learn the language. Mm-hmm.
And Kim, is there a best way to teach Cree? I don't know if there is. I mean, some people are visual learners, some are others are verbal. Is there a best way that you found in your 7 years teaching that maybe some students pick up on, or is I imagine everybody is a little different too, right?
Oh yeah, at the beginning I was doing little verb words like astam, come here, appe, sit, pitige, come in. And we started building those words up. And me, I love to sing. I do singing in Cree, because once we have that song, I break it up into lessons, and it just goes on from there. Nina is I, Gina is you. Okay, so it goes like this. Dance, 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 gina. Mona nato, mona nato, mona nato, nina. Gina ma, dance, gina. Mona nato, nista. So from there on, I would point to you, what would you be in Cree? You is Gina, and me is Nina. And dance, everybody knows dance, hello. And we added dance, Gina, how are you? Mona nato is the reply of, I'm okay, I'm fine.
Well, I think I just got a little mini lesson in Cree, and I'll have to maybe join your class so I can sing along with you one day. But I think you might have touched on this just a little bit a couple questions ago. But what does it mean to you, Kim, to be able to speak Cree and to be able to teach Cree? What does that mean to you?
Well, our language is very descriptive, and it being very descriptive, it comes from your heart. And teaching a word here and there, it means a lot. Like what I just did with the song, that means a lot to me because it opens a lot of dialogue. And not only that, like what has happened in the past, I feel I'm obligated, like I'm important, I'm a language keeper, that I need to keep this going, because like this is my 7th year teaching the language, and it has to start from somewhere. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And then not only that, today, like it's hard work today to revitalize the language, because now me growing up learning the language, it was around me. It was always spoken. I wasn't given a book or a paper. I think that's why sometimes I still have a hard time writing and reading, but I'm teaching that myself. I could speak it if somebody tells me that what I need to know and learn, because growing up, that's what my parents spoke to me all the time in the language.
Kim, what made you wanna teach Cree? What made you want to teach Cree?
This is kind of a sensitive question, because I did not realize how our language was so close to being not taught or spoken because of residential school, and that what has happened to our parents and great grandparents. We still have the mother tongue, and we need to revitalize and revive the language that way. And I think that's why it's very important to me, because I still have it, and I still have the opportunity here where I am and my family to continue on with the language.
Well, that's a great answer, Kim, and we really appreciate you coming on InFocus. Again, I will have to maybe check out one of your classes, and maybe you can give me a lesson or two, and I can start with the basics. But yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, Chimigwich, for your time.
Thank you, Maga.
Well, that's all we have for you this afternoon on APTN InFocus. Again, March 31st, that's this Friday, is National Indigenous Languages Day. The day is an opportunity for Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples to honor Turtle Island's extensive linguistic legacy. And we would love to hear from you speaking in your language. You can send a video to share@aptn.ca of you speaking in your language. All you need to do is record yourself saying your name, where you're from, and say Happy National Indigenous Languages Day in your language. Again, today's episode will be available as a podcast. You can listen and subscribe on aptnews.ca/podcasts, or find us on your favorite player. And if you missed any of our past episodes and you want to catch up, you can find them and more on aptnews.ca/infocus. For all of us here, thank you so much for joining us. Miigwech Kinanaskamitin. Have a great day.